2007 Audi A4 2.0 turbo FSI, and we're gonna do a timing bolt job. Taking the wheels off and removing the bumper. You could do it without removing the wheels, but it's much easier to do it that way. Pop the covers off. Take the wheels off. Take these couple of bolts out of a wheel liner so it could get underneath. There's two more screws holding the bumper, to fender and the bumper bracket. Screws are T25. A little more. Be careful. This thing is very easily getting caught on the fender and ripping, so be careful, don't rip it. When you do that, see that nut all the way in there? And you got another one up on top. You got to remove those two nuts. We use a long extension with a swivel head. Don't lose those nuts. The weird washers on them. So don't lose them. Don't lose those nuts. The weird washers on them. So don't lose them. Once again, be careful, don't rip the wheel liner. You're gonna need to remove the belly pan. Don't lose any of the cleats. The belly pan clips. You have short ones, they go through the bumper into the belly pan. The long ones, they go into the belly pan to the body. Don't lose any of the clips. See the belly pan clips. You have short ones, they go through the bumper into the belly pan, and the long ones, they go into the belly pan to the body. Those are the nuts from the bumper. Those are the nuts from the bumper. Now you have two S10 triple square bolts holding the bumper grills. You don't need to take them out completely, just loosen them. Now lower the car, remove the rest of the T30 bolt screws that are holding up the bumper on top. I got several T30 bolts over here on top, 3 of them. Take those out. And your bumper is free to come out. Don't forget, you have electrical connectors on this side. And if you have headlight washers, then you're gonna have a hose that you need to disconnect. Well, this car doesn't have headlight washers, so we're only gonna disconnect the electrical connectors from the fog lights. And if it has a home link option, then it's gonna be in here too. But all the connectors are on the left side. Now you're gonna need to pop the bumper off. Do that like this. Be gentle. Don't rip the bumper. If the car has been in an accident and the bumper has been repaired, there's a very big chance that you will rip it. So be very gentle, pop it off. And slide it out just a little bit. Maybe have somebody help you so the bumper doesn't fall down. Pull it to the side. Here are the connectors. You have to press on the connector like you're trying to close it, pull on the tab and disconnect it. Do the same to the other one. Press, pull, disconnect. Set a bumper aside. Make sure you don't scratch the bumper, don't drag it on the floor. You will scratch it that way. Now we're gonna need to remove the intercooler shrouds and the radiator support. The intercooler shrouds, you have clips over here. Slide it to the side, take it out, take all the garbage out of the intercoolers. I usually set the shrouds on top of the bumper or somewhere in place where I need to move the shrouds before I take the bumper, because most of the times you will forget to put them on. So make sure you set it up somewhere next to the bumper so you don't have to take the bumper off to put the shrouds on. This shroud is connected. There's a clip on the bottom right here. You look down there, see this clip? You need to release this clip to get the shroud off. Now pull it down. Now we're gonna need to unbolt the radiator support to have some access to the timing belt. We're gonna take the air duct off, 2 Phillips screws if they're still original. We'll remove the engine cover at the same time. T30 bolts, 2 on each side on top of the radiator support. 2 bolts holding the fender to the radiator support, T30 as well. Now you got 3 13mm bolts holding down the radiator support. You have to disconnect this high pressure switch from the AC to get to the bolt. Take those 3 bolts out. Now your radiator support is free to move. Take the weather strip off, set it aside, move the radiator support out just a little bit. That'll be pretty much enough room for us to work in there. Now we're going to remove the accessory belt, 17mm wrench, tighten up the tensioner, take the belt out. Now your radiator support is free to move. Take the weather strip off, set it aside, move the radiator support out just a little bit. that would be pretty much enough room for us to work in there. Now we're gonna remove the accessory belt, 17mm wrench, tighten up the tensioner, take the belt out. Now remove the belt tensioner. Set the tensioner aside. Now, the most hideous thing about this job is if nobody ever removed or did any work on this car, this hose over here never comes off easy. Never. It's about $100 in the dealership for this hose, so be very careful in it. But this hose never comes out easy. Take the clamp off. What I usually do, stick my pick tool under a hose and start working the hose around. It gets so glued onto the pipe, there's almost impossible not to damage it at all. So be very, 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 very careful with this hose. And be very careful, don't break this pipe off. Before you pull the hose off, open the coolant tank and make sure you have no pressure in there. If you have pressure in there, it means your car is hot. So if your car is warm, you most likely will have pressure in there, just to avoid coolant squirting into your head or into your face. Release the pressure first before you take any hoses out. Now we're gonna use this angled long reach needle nose pliers. There's on the lower radiator hose connector, there's a drain port. So we need to open that port up to drain the coolant. So we'll open the drain port over here on the bottom radiator hose. The reason why the coolant is not coming out, it just came out a little bit, is because our expansion tank is closed. So as soon as we open up the expansion tank, the coolant is gonna start pouring out. Now, remove this hose. Remember, we walked it around with the pick tool, and we're gonna walk it off completely off the pipe with the pick tool, because basically this hose is almost impossible to take off without any damage to the hose. Usually set this hose like this so it drains out. Now we're gonna need to remove the timing belt cover. You got a couple of T30 bolts holding the cover. You got two on top over here. Two T30 bolts on top of the cover over here. You got one 10mm bolt over there, and you got a couple more bolts, 10mm bolts lower. Now remove the cover, don't break it, set it aside. Now you're gonna need to put the engine on top of that center. Now remove the cover, don't break it, set it aside. Now you're gonna need to put the engine on top of that center. Move the pulley so you can see the marks clearly. It's a 19mm bolt in the center. It's a 12-point bolt, so you're gonna need a 12-point socket. You got a mark over here. It's not the best of the design. There's a little indent on the cover, and there's a mark on the pulley. Also, you have a upper mark on the camshaft pulley, and there's an arrow showing where the mark is supposed to be. The main crankshaft pulley, it's holding by a 6mm hex bolt. Be very careful when you're removing this pulley. Make sure your 6mm socket is in really good condition and goes in all the way into the bolt. Once again, be very careful when removing those bolts. Don't strip them. Make sure your socket goes in all the way, as deep as it could go. It'd be a good idea to take a mirror and make sure that there's nothing in the bolt. Sometimes they might be so tight you might have to hold the pulley by a main bolt. Becomes a little bit of a pain. Once again, make sure that the socket is in all the way. You strip one of those bolts, it's going to be a project. So these are the bolts you want to take your time with. So these are the bolts you want to take your time with. Okay, we got the bolt loose. Make sure your engine's still at the center. Ours will come off a little bit. Not a big deal. If you have to turn it backwards more than a quarter of a turn. And then pull it back to the top of the center. Now we're going to take the bolt out. Okay, we got all the bolts loose. Make sure your engine is still atop that center. Ours went off a little bit. It's not a big deal. If you have to turn it backwards more than a quarter of a turn, and then pull it back to the top dead center. Now we're gonna take all the bolts out of crank puller. Make sure your engine is on top dead center. And take the crank pull off. Usually doesn't come out that easy. You're gonna use a little pry bar. Not right on the cover. Right on the snap mount bracket. Just a little bit. Don't force it, don't bend anything. And take the crank pull off. Usually doesn't come out that easy. You're gonna use a little pry bar. Do not pry it on the cover. Pry it on the snap mount bracket. Just a little bit. Don't force it, don't bend anything. Better use 2 pry bars at the same time. Just wiggle it a little bit. Make sure you don't bend anything. You don't need to press a lot. You just need to kind of walk it off the crankshaft. Now we're gonna need to remove the lower timing belt cover. 2 10mm bolts. Make sure you don't move the engine anymore. Do not spin it. It's on the marks. Just keep it on marks. Now we're gonna clean everything around here and remove the belt. Now, gotta clean first. Clean out all the dust, grease if you have grease in there. Make sure it's nice and clean. Now we're gonna blow it off with a blowgun. To make sure there's no garbage left in there. And what I usually do, I mark the crankshaft gear just for the reference. Before I remove the belt. Now, take the heater rollers off. Set them aside, don't lose the bolt. The upper roller is 13mm, the lower roller is 12mm. They are for some reason different size bolts. So the upper one that's over here is 13mm, the one that's over here is 12mm. So 13mm knot on the tensioner roller. Don't lose the washer. You're gonna need that. Now slide the belt off the water pump. Take the belt off all the other components. Checking the belt condition. This one wasn't that bad. And throw it out. Remove the tensioner. Take the water pump off. Water pump has 3 10mm bolts. Take them out. Oops. Don't lose them. They have a little weird thread on them, so don't lose those bolts. Oh. I kind of twist the water pump out usually. Let the coolant out. Don't just yank it out. Let the coolant drain slowly. This water pump is still original. It wasn't leaking or anything like that, so we're good. Now clean the inlet of the water pump hole. Make sure there is no rust, no excessive rust or grease or anything like that. If there is any excessive rust around here, try to take it out, or you might damage the O-ring when putting a new pump in. Take a new pump, use only original pump. We've tried to use a lot of aftermarket pumps. They do not work. They start leaking very fast. Even though this have a plastic impeller, this impeller will last you about 60-70,000 miles. That's approximately the time you're gonna need to do the timing belt again. If you're trying to get a metal impeller and you're afraid that this impeller is gonna fail on you, metal impeller water pump is gonna start leaking after a couple of thousand miles, so it's not worth it. Loop the O-ring on the pump just a little bit so it goes in nice and easy. And kind of twist it in. Do not tighten it until it's sitting all the way flush to the block. If you see any space between the pump and the block, it's not in all the way. If you put the bolts in, you will damage the O-ring. It has to be tight. See, it's tight all the way to the block. Now you can put the bolts back in. So now we're gonna put the tensioner roller in. We will not tighten it, we're just gonna kind of put it on and hand tighten it. We have a NTN tensioner over here. I'm gonna slide it in. See this tab over here? It has to go into this freeze plug. This tab has to be in this freeze plug. Put the nut on, don't tighten it, put it on so it's there. They also NTN, just gonna put a little bit of Loctite in there. Don't put too much Loctite, you might get into the roller bearings and seize them up. Tighten up the tensioners or the rollers. Now, this is what I do. I take the crank pulley and roll it back exactly one tooth before putting the belt on. Now I put the belt on. Make sure it goes into all the teeth and every pulley. Try to make the side where the tensioner is, the tight side, and leave the other one loose. Now we have the belt on. It's kind of tight on this side is loose. And then we're gonna tighten up the tensioner. This tooth that we turn back is gonna go right into the spot where it's supposed to be. So now, you see we're turning the tensioner up. Now we tighten it, and it went back right back at the spot where it's supposed to be. So now there's a trick on the tensioner. See this little green tooth and this little notch over here? They're supposed to align. So when you tighten up the tensioner, those two are supposed to align. When they align, you tighten up this 13mm nut to 17 foot-pounds. Now we're gonna do 2 complete turns of the engine. Gonna compare our marks, the mark we made and the camshaft mark. Make sure they align. Then we're gonna put the timing bolt cover on the main pulley and double check it again. You see? See? The marks align. Marks align good. Now we're gonna put the lower timing bolt cover on. And then the crank pulley. Yeah. Try to clean everything you take off the car. Just makes it look neater. On the main pulley, see this little hole in between the both holes? It's supposed to be right in this pin. So set it up over there. Well, it's going good. Make sure you always put thread lock on the main pulley bolts. Always. I've seen a lot of times that the main pulley will bolt even though it was tightened like crazy. Always watch. Make sure you don't drop anything in there. Always watch. Make sure you don't drop anything in there into the timing belt covers, because it will cause damage. Always watch. Make sure you don't drop anything in there into the timing belt covers, because it will cause damage. Now we're gonna impact ratchet, tighten up the pulley, make sure your socket goes all the way into the bolt, in order not to strip the bolts. So we tighten the pulley up. We're gonna make 2 more revolutions and make sure our marks align perfectly. Check the marks. Make sure they're perfectly aligned. You can put the upper timing belt cover on and assemble everything back. Check the marks. Make sure they're perfectly aligned. You could put the upper timing belt cover on and assemble everything back. We got 1 long bolt goes up here. We got 1 short bolt, 10mm bolt over here. 1 over here. 1 over here. And 1 over here. I got two T30 bolts on top. Make sure this cover is sitting. I see this one's not closed. Make sure it's closed. If it's gonna be rattling around, after a bit, it's gonna get into the timing belt and then you have a problem. Now you got two T30 bolts on top. Make sure this cover is sitting. Like, see, this one is not closed. Make sure it's closed. If it's gonna be rattling around, God forbid, it's gonna get into the timing belt and then you have a problem. Now we're gonna put our bad boy hose back on. Make sure you put it on all the way. Put the hose clamp on. Put the accessory belt tensioner back on. Actually, it's easier to put the belt on first before the accessory belt tensioner. The belt goes on the alternator, on the power steering pump, around this intermediate pulley, an AC compressor, and the crankshaft pulley, and then the tensioner goes here. So we got alternator, around the power steering pump, around the idler pulley, around the AC compressor, and around the crank pulley. Now we're gonna just slip the belt off the alternator so we could put the tensioner back on. Now tighten up the tensioner, put the belt back onto the alternator, make sure it's still in all the grooves and all the pulleys, release the tensioner. Now tighten up the tensioner, put the belt back onto the alternator, make sure it's still in all the grooves and all the pulleys, release the tensioner. That's about it. Now we need to close the drain plug and the radiator and assemble the body back on. That's it, it's closed. Now put the radiator support back on. Make sure you don't damage any headlights or any other parts. Slide it back up. Make sure you put two bolts, one on each side to hold it hanging. Take all 6 of these 13mm bolts, put them in a couple of turns, do not tighten them at first. We're gonna tighten one bolt on each side. You gotta align it by the marks where it used to be. You could clearly see the marks. So align it. Tighten one bolt. Now go to the other side. If you're if you're gonna tighten up more than one bolt on one side, you will not be able to adjust the other side. So align this one as well by the marks where it used to be. Now you could tighten them all. Connect the high pressure switch back up. Same thing with all the other body bolts. You have to put them in and make sure they went in exactly in the spot where they used to be. Now tighten up all the other bolts. Make sure the bolts went in into the same spot where they used to be. So you don't need to realign your headlights or anything like that. Put the weather strip back on. Slide all the connectors back in. We took the connectors out so they wouldn't stretch the wiring harness. Intercooler shrouds back on. Remember this one goes in on top first. Slide it in, clip it on the bottom. That one goes from the side. Clip it in, make sure it's good, make sure everything's connected. Now you can put the bumper on. Have somebody help you put the bumper on. Connect all the electrical connectors first. Now slide the bumper in, be careful, don't scratch the fenders. Clip the sides of it over here. Need to hold the bumper back on. You're gonna need to have somebody helping you to press on the bumper so it's flush with the fender. Tighten the nuts up. Now do the other side. All right. Now these T25 screws on the inside of the bumper. Put the fender liner back in. Now these T25 screws on the inside of the bumper. Put the fender liner back in. Tighten up the fender liner. Now raise the car, put the belly pan back on. Put the belly pan back on.